You are listening to KPPQ-LP Ventura. Welcome to Creators Corner. I'm your host, Bob Telford. Creators Corner is a show that focuses on the arts, music, and theater and the people who make it. Ventura County is chock full of artists, and we hope to share their thoughts and journeys with you. So let's get started. Our guest today is a classically trained composer and keyboardist. He is the band leader of his own chamber orchestra called the Free Will Chamber Orchestra. He's also studying and composing music for his orchestra as well as for himself. He teaches piano and voice for beginner and intermediate students, and as if that wasn't enough, he is also an audio engineer and an award-winning sound designer. Please welcome to Creators Corner, Simon Reyes. Simon, welcome.
Hi.
So, let's start at the beginning, shall we?
Okay.
When were you first introduced to music?
I was first introduced to music in college. I had no formal training before that. What I knew was audio. I'd been working with audio for a while.
Right.
And I wanted to expand what I knew about audio. And I went to Calce Channel Islands for university, and they didn't have an audio engineering degree. So I was like, okay, well, what has audio? Music has audio. I'll do that.
Wow. Sort of came in through the back door.
Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. So you started in college, and going from the audio aspect to actually playing music, I mean, you had to start at square one, right?
Oh, yeah, no, it was like learning a new language. Early on, it was really, really confusing because you have to learn all this terminology and stuff. And I was like, I don't know anything about music. The only thing I knew about music was that it sounded good, and that was about it.
Well, it's a good place to start because we all love music in one way or another, which brings me to my next question. Why classical music?
Well, that's what I was trained in. I didn't have any other kind of training, so when I was learning music theory, it was all in the context of a keyboard. It was all classical. You study Mozart, Beethoven, Bach, all those people.
Right.
So they didn't have any jazz programs or anything else like that. I think they did have like a pop music writing class, but it was like a one unit thing that was just took up too much time. I didn't want to do it.
Right, right. Well, and listen, you know what? There's nothing wrong with classical music. It's just so rare. A young person starting off and wanting to learn to play music, we generally try to go with the genres that we're most familiar with, is pop or rock or that kind of stuff. So classicals is an awesome. And was it piano that you basically started on?
Yeah, I didn't know this going into the major. I probably wouldn't have chosen it if I knew. But you have to learn an instrument when you study music. They require you to.
Right.
And my theory professor said, hey, all music theory we're going to be teaching is taught in the context of a keyboard. If you have to learn an instrument, you should just do piano because you're going to have to get really familiar with it anyway.
Oh, my gosh, yeah. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I know for a fact that a piano skill is one that's a very strong base to start with, especially in light of the fact that you are a composer, and that you have to have that skill. I mean, if you were playing guitar or something, I suppose you could do it in certain genres, but certainly not in the classical arena.
It can be done. I know there's a couple of composers who learned using guitar. They're not as common, but they're there.
Right. Yeah. Now, were you born in the Ventura area?
I was born in Santa Paula.
Santa Paula, close enough.
Born and raised over there.
And your family is here, and so you're able to stay connected with them. And what are their thoughts? Anyone in your family that comes from a musical background?
No. Basically none of them. None of them have any musical background or anything like that. I do know that a couple of cousins on my grandmother's side were in like a mariachi or something like that.
Wow.
But beyond that, we have no, I don't have like a grandpa who was a great composer or anything like that, or an uncle who played with a, philharmonic. I don't have any of that.
Right, right. I noticed in the performance that I witnessed that you not only do your own compositions, but you play other composers' works as well. Obviously, with the other composers, there's certain challenges there in terms of reconfiguring them for your particular group of musicians here. But what are the challenges for you as a composer in your own right?
Yeah. Well, writing for chamber orchestra is kind of counterintuitively very limiting.
Right.
Because what I need to include all my musicians, and the original music doesn't usually account for the musicians that I have because, composer died 200 years ago or whatever.
Right.
And it's probably written for a completely different instrument, so I have to write it specifically for them. I have to know, okay, can they play this line? No, okay, I have to modify it, but it has to all still work within the music. And then, of course, it just takes a long time to write for whatever 12 to 15 musicians.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
It's a lot of lines of music, and it's very exhausting after a while because there's just certain things in music writing. I feel like there's some mystique around like classical composition and music theory, but to be honest with you, a lot of it just feels like algebra. It feels like trig, like when you're doing it's like problem solving, but it's all very rule based. So you have to do all this stuff, and then certain things don't work, and you have to go back and fix them. And it just takes a very long time. But I love it. I love like puzzle solving like that.
Yeah, I think with anything that you do, you have to love it. You have to be passionate about it. It's funny you mentioned about trigonometry and all that. I do know for a fact that a lot of musicians are very good with math as well, so it goes hand in hand. Your group, it's very diverse.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's fascinating, and I'm wondering how you go about assembling a group of musicians, especially because each one of, you have the stringed instruments, you got the woodwinds, you have percussion, all of those. How did you, bring these musicians together? How did you find them?
Oh, I just asked nicely.
Oh, is that it? It's as easy as that?
Oh, basically, almost every single musician I've ever had join the ensemble or the orchestra. I said, hey, I have a group that plays music. You want to play with me? And they say, okay, and they join me.
Wow. Because, when you hear stories of how rock bands were formed, it's always, well, we posted a notice in the local music store, and that's how we got it. But it occurred to me that maybe it was a whole different ball of wax when it comes to putting together a chamber orchestra.
No, I just ask.
Well, good for you.
Yeah.
And they couldn't possibly turn you down, right?
Oh, I'm just such a nice guy.
Now, the one thing I would like to do during the course of this interview is to play a piece of music. So if it's all right with you, we're going to listen to a piece now, and then afterwards we'll talk a little bit about it. That's a beautiful piece of music. And now that's one that you composed?
Yes, that's mine.
And what's the name of the piece?
It's called Kaleidoscope.
Ah. Now, when you compose a piece of music, do you hear it in your head? Or how does it come to you? How does the inspiration and the breaking down of the various instruments and their parts within the piece itself, how does that come to you?
So every single piece is completely different. Kaleidoscope in particular, I started writing it basically by accident, where I was improvising and playing on the piano, and I tried to play a chord, and I played it wrong. But I really liked the way it sounded. So I said, okay, well, what can I do with this chord? Because it's pretty. I want to work something with it. I ended up just kind of making it up as I went. I started improvising with it and messing around with it. And eventually I had a full piece for keyboard. And I would play it, and people really liked it. And eventually I was like, well, I have a group now. Maybe I should just play it with them. And so from there, I started adding melodies and stuff on top of it. And that's how it became that whole orchestral thing.
Wow, very cool, very cool. When you take another composer's piece,
Yes.
do you honor the traditional composition and the way it was originally written, or do you find yourself wanting to modify it in certain ways to accommodate what it is that you're trying to do with your group?
Oh, when you arrange something, you try your absolute best to make sure that it is within what the composer would want. Like, you have to kind of maintain their artistic vision as best as you can. You wouldn't, I mean, unless you're doing that on purpose, like if you're taking a Baroque piece and you're doing it in a jazz style or something like that. But like when I'm arranging for my orchestra, like I have a piece that we perform sometimes called Passacaglia by Handel, and it's a beautiful piece of music, and but it's very straightforward. And so if you add kind of weird stuff to it, it becomes very distracting to what the composer would have actually written there. So you have to kind of maintain what you think as best you can the composer would have done had they written it for that group.
Wow. So the other question that I have, because in your bio you mentioned that you are teaching students, you're
Yes.
teaching piano and voice for beginners and intermediates. What is your approach when you're working with someone who decided that they wanted to play piano or that they wanted to sing?
Usually I just start where I started, the very, very basic fundamentals, and just kind of going through those and trying to give people a strong foundation so that way when they become, or when they want to become, more advanced, they can have a good, strong starting point.
So it's not about perfection right out of the gate. It's about building. It's like building a foundation for a house. If it's a solid foundation, then you will get better with time. The other thing that I was wondering was, in your performance, I noticed that there were several hymns that you performed, that you and the
Yes.
group performed. What's the reason for that?
I really like hymns, and
What is it you like about them? That's fascinating.
I've just always found old hymns to be very, very beautiful. The main one that we do is called "Abide with Me," and I just love it. Like, I just love that piece. I don't know what it is, but something about it just really, like, I feel like I wish I could write something that beautiful. Something about that piece I just really love.
So just having heard it, or maybe
Yeah.
you played it once, it was inspiring to you?
It's just the simplicity of it, the melody, how beautiful it is, and then the lyrics too. The actual text to the music is also very nice.
Right, right. You know, it's interesting. One of the things that I noticed in the group that you have is there are people that I see, like, for example, the young lady that plays, I believe it's alto sax,
Yes.
and I don't know her name, forgive me, I think she told me one time. But it's sort of interesting to see the different individuals and what instruments they play.
Oh, yes. Yeah, her name is Idalia, and she has her own group. It's called the Victoria Avenue Band. They're a very, very good jazz band.
Right,
Yeah.
right. I think I've heard them play here at
Oh,
Ecu
yeah.
Green.
They're great.
Yeah, it's fascinating, though, because I looked at her and I go, now she's not someone that I would have said, oh, she's going to play saxophone.
Yeah.
You know, and then I saw there's one of the flute players that is older gentleman.
Yeah.
You know, which again goes back to the diversity of your group. And I was saying to myself, he doesn't look like a flute player to me, you know.
Yeah.
So, but it all made sense once they picked up their instruments and started playing. It was working. And the young lady that played, what is it? The xylophone, is that?
As it's a marimba.
Marimba. Boy, I tell you, I was watching her, and the way with the mallets, she was just going to town.
Oh,
and I'm
yeah, no,
thinking,
she's great.
it was fantastic because I was like watching her and I'm going, how the heck? I mean, you know, when you're stringed instruments, you know the placement for your intonation and all that. and the same thing with the woodwinds and whatnot. You know which keys to hit, but that's a whole different ball of wax.
I mean, marimba is an interesting instrument. I've always liked the way it sounded too. It's hard to find marimba players who want to actually.
I was just going to say it's just a gorgeous sound, but
it's beautiful.
I don't imagine there are a lot of people out there that play them.
Oh yeah, no, Christy, the marimba player, she does a great job with all that, and she's a fantastic mallet player, and even one of the flute players, not the older gentleman, but the other flute player, his name's Izzy. He's also a very good percussionist. He can also play marimba. He's great too.
Is that right? Because I noticed he went over to the piano before you guys started your set, and he was playing there as well. So
yeah, the thing with marimbas and xylophones and glockenspiels too is the way the notes are arranged are identical to keyboards.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, they're exactly the same.
Wow. And I know that you play the accordion as well. So
yes.
I mean, my great-grandfather played the piano and the accordion, and it was like he played the accordion more than he did the piano, but it was just fascinating how the skill set was, transferable.
Oh yeah, you can transfer all kinds of stuff to different instruments.
Right.
Not all of them, but some of them.
Now, being a composer and having to sit down and write a piece of music, and you've never actually, I mean, you don't play saxophone, you don't play flute, you don't play violin or marimba. So how, I mean, I guess this is again because I'm not that familiar with the whole side of composition. How do you go about saying, this is the voice I want this instrument to play, and this is the voice how does that happen in your head?
Sometimes it depends on what I'm thinking of. For example, let's say I come up with a melody. If the melody is it's a light melody, it's beautiful, it's soft, then I wouldn't want to necessarily put it on something like a brass instrument. It would be too heavy. And so I have to think, okay, well, what else can I put? Okay, well, there's clarinet, that would work. Okay, well, flute, that would work. Violin, that would work. All these things that are kind of a lighter instrument that has a higher register. That's what I would want for a lighter melody. Now, if I have something that's more aggressive, maybe I would want to put that on like brass or cello,
right,
or something like that, or maybe even marimba if I'm feeling, zany that day. I don't know, but
I wouldn't have thought of marimba as being zany, but it's I guess it makes sense.
Yeah, but you can. I mean, it's interesting trying out different melodies on different instruments, but usually I just kind of I'll think of what I want from that melody in my mind, and if I want it to have a certain sound, then I'll put it on an instrument that will have that character.
Right. Now, trombone and what was it, French horn? Was that the?
It was the other instrument he has is a baritone horn.
Oh, okay.
It's not as common of an instrument. It's usually reserved for like brass bands or concert bands will have baritone horns, and they're very nice for filling out a sound. They have a good warm sound to them.
It was funny because there was one section where it was just the two of them playing, and it's a fascinating. It's very, the vibe you get from it when you hear them is just so vastly different. Now, chamber orchestras are generally, in terms of the number of musicians, is there any particular number that's kind of a standard?
No. I mean, the minimum technically for a chamber orchestra is, I believe, 12. I think you need at least 12 to be considered a chamber orchestra.
Right.
But no, chamber orchestras can be kind of any size as long as they're not. I mean, once you get to a full-size symphonic orchestra, then it's a full-size orchestra. But chamber orchestras are just kind of anything in between that.
They're the more intimate version of an orchestra.
Yeah. And even then, I've seen some big chamber orchestras. I've seen chamber orchestras that have like 40 people. You can get them pretty big.
Well, it's funny you mention that because I always thought of chamber music as being a very particular style or genre.
I mean, it is. Chamber music is usually whatever's a smaller group. Or you can even, I think solo music too can be technically considered chamber music. But yeah, they are usually a little bit more intimate, like a quartet is chamber music,
right.
Quintets, sextets, all that.
So here's a question. As a young man, and you go to college.
I graduated, but not anymore, but I used to.
Well, but what I was about to ask you is did your friends and your family wonder what the heck in terms of your choices? I mean, was there ever a moment when everyone around you was thinking, Simon, what are you thinking?
No, I mean, my family's always been very, very supportive
Right.
of, of what I'm doing. And, they do the other thing of like, well, as long as you have a solid thing to fall back on and
Oh, yeah.
all that.
Yeah. As an artist, you need something to fall back on,
Right, right.
unfortunately.
But I mean, I've never really had them say like, where are you going with this? Because I've done a lot of work with music, and I've been able to perform at venues that were, I mean, large venues. I performed at the Oxnard Performing Arts Center. I did Cal Lutheran, and then right out of college with the choir, we performed at Carnegie Hall.
Yeah, that's
So-
pretty impressive.
so-
Not everybody can say that.
It's true. And so with that, and with the people I talk to and the groups I have, they can see how much work I put into it. And so they just kind of say, okay, well, you look like you know what you're doing. Let's go ahead.
Wow. So I want to address two other subjects within the context of your bio, and that is that you are an audio engineer and an award-winning sound designer.
That is correct.
So let's break it down. Audio engineer, I mean, I think is probably self-explanatory in its title.
Yeah.
But sound designer, what exactly does that entail?
So I worked on a short film. There was a director I was working with who was from Cal Arts, and for her kind of like final thesis that she was doing, she made a short animation and like a short film, and it has like 8 to 10 minutes of animation that she did, and they had me basically do all the sound effects for it. So I was doing like Foley and making sound effects for that short film. And using what I know about audio and recording and stuff, and I started adding all the sound effects together to kind of give it life. Because if you listen to movies without sound effects, they sound like nothing.
Oh, yeah.
It's very bizarre. It's like taking the music out. It's weird.
Yeah.
And that film itself, it played at a film festival called the Hope International Film Festival. I believe it's based in Russia, like Eastern Russia. That's in Europe, and it won an award for best sound design.
Wow. Well, congratulations
Thank
to you
you.
on that. So the other thing that I was going to ask you is that because music is a big part of all of our lives.
Right.
So what is your favorite part of creating music? What aspect of creating music do you get the greatest joy from?
The greatest joy from creating, I really like just playing music with people. I like jamming.
Oh, really?
Jamming is probably the best, most fun part, because when you jam and you improvise, you'll come up with stuff that you would have never thought of just because you're in the moment. And it's just so much fun. I love playing it with people.
That's fascinating because usually when someone mentions jamming, they're usually it's in regards to jazz,
Yeah.
or even certain forms of rock or blues or whatever.
Yeah.
But certainly not something that I would have normally thought of when talking about classical music. But
Right.
I
mean,
guess with any music you can jam it.
It's true. I mean, I usually don't improvise that much with my classical group. I will sometimes,
Right.
which is fun too.
Right.
But when I do jam, it's usually with a rock band.
Ah,
Or
okay,
Sometimes
so-
every once in a blue moon, I'll play with a jazz
So
group.
you'll step outside of your classical arena and
Yes.
join in with the commoners. I mean, I don't mean to say that because all music, in my opinion, is really, especially anyone who performs it, anyone who composes it, it takes a great deal of skill. And even when people talk about rock and roll and the fact that it was primarily 3 chords,
Yeah.
there's still something to be said for artists that are able to create good, solid, rock and roll songs or any genre for that matter.
Yeah, no, there is a thing in the classical world where people are like, "Oh, I hate using this," or hearing people say this when people say, "Oh, that's not real music." I hate that so much.
What are they referring to when they say that?
It can be anything. It can say pop or rock or whatever.
Oh,
And say,
I see
it's
what you
not.
mean.
That's not real music.
Right.
Yes, I hate that because the thing people bring up usually with pop is that, well, it's only 4 chords. It's not
Right,
that hard.
right.
And it's like people have used 4 chords for hundreds of years.
Right.
Because it works. It sounds good.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you think it's so easy to make a pop hit with 4 chords, then go make one.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
No, it's not. And that's the thing that I think a lot of people fail to understand. And in fact, it is sort of fascinating because you do have some people who I would call music snobs.
Oh yes.
And they're either lovers of whether it's classical or jazz or whatever, and they do look at the pop rock genres as being, second-class citizens.
Oh yeah. Well, they don't know what a Neapolitan sixth chord is. They're not real musicians.
Well, you've already lost me because I have no idea what that is.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Yeah.
But it sounds good.
Yeah.
It sounds good on paper. It sounds good when you say it, and I'm sure it sounds great when you play it. So, that's always fascinating to me. Yeah. Well, I think, is there anything that you would like to share with our audience that, with regards to what it is that you do, or just the whole, anybody who might be considering delving into the classical music arena and becoming a composer? Is there something that you would share with them? It would be a bit of advice.
A bit of advice. I mean, I would say just try anything you want. Music has a bunch of rules, but it doesn't mean you have to follow them. I mean, rules are important to know, but I mean, you should just try new things when you're working on music, right. And definitely listen to as much music as you possibly can.
Got it.
Especially when you're trying to write something new. What you don't want is to listen to only one particular style, and then you just become influenced purely by that, because what you'll become is just a cheap copy, and you don't want that. You want to express yourself, and so you listen to as many different influences as possible, so you can combine them in this big mosaic of this music that you're making, and it becomes you. It's your style now.
And as far as inspirations, is there a particular composer that you are especially fond of?
Oh, I mean, there's a lot of composers I really like. It's hard to choose.
So it would be like if I said, "What's your favorite movie?" Or
right. It's hard
the same
to choose.
thing. Yeah, they're all good.
They're all good, yeah. But I mean, I really like. I'll pick three. They're all completely different. I like Dmitri Shostakovich. He's a Russian composer.
Right.
A modern composer. I really like Philip Glass.
Oh, yeah.
And Claude Debussy, who's a French impressionist composer. I like those three, and they're as far away from each other as you can possibly get.
Right.
But I love all their music.
I noticed that in your set that you actually did play a Glass composition.
Oh yeah, I played a couple of them.
Yeah, and I find it's funny because not even knowing that it was one of his pieces, but I've always liked his work in general. Mm-hmm. So he definitely has a sound that everyone can appreciate.
Oh, yeah.
What's on the horizon for you as far as what's coming up? What you got any new ideas, projects, or anything like that you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, I've written a brand new piece of music. It's a chamber symphony.
Wow.
Which is a multi-movement work. There's 5 movements. And I'm going to be premiering it on November 9th. And
somewhere in the General Ventura area?
It'll be in Oxnard.
Oh, that's not too far away.
So it'll be in Oxnard. There's a theater there called Teatro de las Américas.
I'm not familiar with it.
The people who are in charge of it are very, very nice. Some of the people who work there, there's a piano here. They helped me move that piano. They're very nice people.
Really?
Yeah. And so I'm going to be premiering some new music there. And it'll be November 9th at 7 o'clock. And there is a ticket charge. It's $20. But
right.
It's going to be somewhere close to the tune of like 2 hours of music. So
wow.
You'll get your money's worth, I promise.
Yeah. Now, as far as social media, everyone, of course, uses social media now.
Yes.
So if anybody wants to follow you, is there any platforms that you have out there that you want to share information-wise as far as how people can see where you are and what you're up to?
So the main thing that I use is Instagram. And for me, it's just Simon_Reyes_composer.
Fantastic.
So it's really easy to find.
Wow. Well, it has been a pleasure to sit down and talk to you, especially in light of having witnessed several performances and I've also seen you working with students. So, I can appreciate everything that you do. And it's just amazing to me that you've got your fingers in so many different pies, and you do quite well with all of them. So,
thank you.
Congratulations to you on that.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for joining us here on Creator's Corner.
Anytime.
All right. What an amazing time we've had. I can't wait to share our next guest with you. Many thanks to Caps Radio and KPPQ LP Ventura. So until next time, stay safe, be well, and have fun. See ya. This is KPPQ LP Ventura.